live. I'm reading A Lot to Remember. This is a book about a part of France, Lot, and it is Joan Marshall Grant's journeys through this area of France. She's recounting a lot of history to do with this area, and we are now in chapter 25, The Children's Lot. When I claimed to have suffered only from 3 fleas and a momentary brush with mosquitoes in the lot, I had forgotten the home fly which flew into the car one evening as we were leaving Cahors and bit me on the eyelid. We were within a mile of La Roque des Arts, where we were dining, and by the end of dinner my face was so hideously swollen that I thankfully retreated to a delightful bedroom. I think it is number 11, at the end of the upper corridor of the Hôtelier Beau Rivage, where for 3 days I remained secluded, comforted by delicious meals, luxuriating in hot baths, and basking on the flat top of a truncated tower outside one of the 3 windows. By our last evening I was fairly presentable, in spite of a black eye, but Charles, who had taken the car to Cahors to be serviced, was late getting back, so it was 9 o'clock when we went down to the dining room. 5 other tables were still occupied by late arrivals who, judging by their clothes, which were far smarter than we were used to seeing in the lot, were breaking their journey on their way back to Paris. We are just finishing our écrevisse when there enters a party of 4 adults and 7 children. The eldest child is about 8 years old and the youngest is a baby. While the soup is being served, the baby wakes up and stares fixedly at the tureen. Mother, who has been preparing a bottle for him by mixing powdered milk with hot water from a thermos, exclaimed, "Oh, look, look! At last Philibert has noticed what we were eating." Everyone at the table joins in the excitement. "Philibert must have some soup in his bottle," clamour the brothers and sisters. "He wants it, he wants it." Mother, delighted, tips away half the formula and tops up the bottle with soup. Good, rich soup it is too. Not the pallid broth which is all Philibert could have hoped for had he been English. He has a good long suck at it after Mother has enlarged the hole in the teat by prodding it with a hairpin. Then he gazes around and loudly burps his approval. Everyone is enchanted, including the occupants of the other tables, who beam or nod to show that they have noticed that yet another Frenchman has graduated from the dull business of mere eating to the appreciative enjoyment of appetite. Halfway through the bottle, Philibert is handed to Father, so that Mother can get at her soup before it grows cold. Father, knowing the drill, has emptied his plate quickly. By the time Philibert demands a second helping, the soup tureen has been taken away, so he is given a fragment of truffle omelette. He is now drowsy and is handed on from lap to lap around the table, a cosy variant of the Dormouse at the Mad Hatter's tea party. He has nearly completed the circuit when he becomes sufficiently alert to enjoy breadcrumbs well soaked in the chicken's luscious sauce, which is affectionately fed to him by his eldest sister, and then goes serenely to sleep. I was describing this incident to Madame Rocher. We were in the kitchen of the Aux Bonnes Choses, and happened to say that in a London restaurant no one would have appreciated Philibert, for in many of them children are considered somewhat out of place. At first she thought I was joking, and then exclaimed indignantly, "When I had my little restaurant, close to the Chambre de Députés, my clientele was the most distinguished in Paris. But if I had not made children welcome, I should have lost all my customers in a week. The thought of the appalling stupidity of English restaurateurs caused her to glare into a stewpan, and then clash down the lid. A restaurant without children, how can one imagine it? How can anyone hope to become a gourmet unless from his earliest years he is taught how to eat? That a civilized approach to the pleasures of the tables can be acquired very early in life was exemplified on the following day, when 9 children, unaccompanied by an adult, came to the hotel for lunch. The 2 eldest are girls of about 10, certainly no older. The others are considerably younger. The smallest boy is about 3 and has to be lifted onto his chair, which has its seat elevated by a hassock. We know some of the children by sight, for their parents have a house in the village to which they come in the summer holidays. The others are their guests who arrived yesterday. Enter Madame Rocher. She embraces the taller girl, Jeanette, who introduces her to those of the party she had not yet met, and Gazette then announces, "All our parents have gone out for the day, so my mother thought it would be nice for us to have our luncheon with you." Madame Rocher declares that she is enchanted at the pleasure of their company and reads aloud the menu. It is to their liking, or would they prefer her to prepare something different? There's hors d'oeuvres, tripes, boeuf en daube, stuffed tomatoes. Will that be enough? A salad, perhaps, before the fruit? The children nod as each item is mentioned. They agree that they will have everything, the salad too, and could there be an ice as well as the fruit? Certainly there can be an ice. Coffee or vanilla? Coffee or vanilla? The children seat themselves and tuck their napkins expectantly under their chins, that of the smallest being tied around his neck by an attentive and only slightly older brother. With unhurried courtesy, they hand dishes of hors d'oeuvres to each other, placing olive stones and radish stalks in a neat row on the edge of their plates. With complete decorum, they remain absorbed by the joys of eating for the next hour and a half. Only then does the smallest child, whom I had been watching with some anxiety, fearing he would either have to be sick or burst, give a deep sigh of repletion and doze off after resting his head carefully on the table so as not to upset a wine glass. They all drank wine mixed with their mineral water. The proportion graduated according to their age. A few moments later he awoke, refreshed by his nap and still enchantingly amiable. They all filed into the kitchen to thank Madame Rocher and compliment her on the excellence of the menu, queued beside the basin in the hall to wash their unsticky hands and faces, and then, when we expected to see them process sedately down the street, suddenly burst into an exuberance of energy, running and shouting and clambering over the rocks and being as boisterous as any English children could have been. The first time I saw a newly born baby brought into a Louise estaminet, I was surprised when young men, rough men so old that their skins creaked as they rose from the table, crowded around it, jostling each other for a closer view. But Frenchmen genuinely admire babies, and when one is offered for inspection it is essential to make some appropriately flattering remark, to which everyone will listen and which by nightfall will have been repeated throughout the village. Charles solved this problem by using the phrases employed by Irishmen when trying to sell a rather doubtful horse. What a bold eye he has gained him considerable kudos, for it was taken to mean that in due course it would sire many more bold babies. Look at the great shoulders on him, foxed the audience for a minute, as well it might, for all that was visible was its little muffin-like face. Then the father broke into shouts of delighted laughter and declared that Charles had forecast the fulfillment of his recent ambition, that his son would wear the yellow jersey, the gauge of victory at the Tour de France bicycle race. On a later occasion he cried, "She will be the best little filly that ever looked through a bridle." But this fell rather flat, understandably, as I have not yet seen anyone on horseback in the lot. Bourgeois children are allowed to eat or not to eat as they feel inclined, but even more important that they are not sent to bed when they have no desire to sleep. At village fete, it is normal to see children bubbling over with vitality at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have walked in Saint-Césaire at midnight, where, except in the holiday season, everything closes at 10 p.m., and seen children playing hide and seek among the sheeted horses of a merry-go-round long after their parents have gone to bed. The reason they can do this without getting tired is that they take a nap whenever they need one. Anywhere will do, a haystock, or the main stalks in the back of an ox cart, or a coat under a bench in an estaminet, and for the babies there are always plenty of laps. When I mentioned to a friend of Haget's that English children had a fixed bedtime, she stared at me in astonishment. "But how can that be so? My eldest son is only 3, but if I told him when he ought to go to bed, it would be more unkind that I make him wear nappies now that he has announced when he desires to make pee-pee." It's not mere pride in paternity which makes these men so adept at handling babies, but because they have been brought up to regard the opposite sex as a compliment instead of as an inferior or a rival. I've often seen a boy giving a bottle to a younger member of the family, or changing its nappy, and even the toughest of them has no fear of being thought a sissy if he offers a little girl a bunch of flowers. Although Charles, when he first saw this preliminary wooing, said rather cynically that the boy must have come from a family of restaurateurs, and so known that however high the chef's bonnet is, it is almost invariably his woman who actually cooks. The girls accept their posies with becoming modesty, but know themselves worthy of this masculine tribute, for from a very early age they have been taken trouble to please. Most graphically was this demonstrated by 2 little girls whom we met while walking beside the stream which feeds the waterfall above Antoine. They were talking earnestly together, the younger pleading for a favour which the elder withheld. As the larger was certainly no more than 9 years old, and the smaller about 3, and it must have been a long drudge for them up this steep hill from the village, I thought the little one was imploring her sister to carry her home, a service which Charles would willingly perform. Think that it might be easier for them to accept our assistance if they thought that adults, moreover foreign adults, who sometimes deliberately walk when they might ride, could also admit to being exhausted. I announced as we came within earshot, and not without honesty, that I found myself to be enormously fatigued. They heard me and looked up, politely smiling. We offered sweets, which they accepted. We engaged them in conversation on the prevalence of wild flowers, the pleasant sound of the waterfall, our friendship with Monsieur le Marquis and his so charming mother and wife. This so that they should not take us for kidnappers when I suggested that we should return together to the village. Charles was about to add that he would be honoured if they would take turns in riding on his shoulders when the elder said apologetically, "I regret, madame, that we are not yet ready to return home. We shall be fully occupied for at least another hour." She paused to look sternly at her sister. "We shall have to stay here for at least 2 hours if she wriggles." At this, the little one chirruped, "I will keep still, I promise," and showing no sign of fatigue, pranced around us chanting, "Antoinette is going to make my hair look pretty. Antoinette is going to give me lots and lots of beautiful curls." Antoinette rebuked her for this unseemly display of exuberance, and then took from the pocket of her blue pinafore a comb and a packet of hairpins, which they set out carefully on the ledge of rock. She dipped the comb in the stream and ran it through the girl's hair to damp it, saying, "Now lie down and put your head in my lap and keep still, or I shall have to bite you." Then, perhaps conscious that threats should never be necessary to maintain discipline, she added gently, "You must keep still as a little dead bird, so that I can make you look pretty." She began curling the silky maize-coloured hair expertly round her finger, setting each curl in place with a pair of interlaced hairpins. She was so absorbed in her task that we might suddenly have become invisible. But as we got up to leave, she smiled up at me and said, "My little sister had been so naughty that our mother said she must go with straight hair to the fete tomorrow. But why should the boy who loves her be disappointed that she has no curls?" So that was the end of chapter 25. Chapter 26 is Station Soufflé. Wishing all a lovely Wednesday.